I'll send it. And make sure that light's on, right, Roddy?
Okay, good evening. Let's see, it's 5:32. We have all members of the subcommittees, both subcommittees. This is a joint subcommittee of the School Finance and the City Council Finance subcommittees. It's a follow-up from previous meetings that we committed to have, to continue the dialogue on finances in the city, both on the school and the city side. So with that, Mr. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Counselor Elliott.
Here.
Counselor Conway.
Here.
Counselor Noon.
Here.
School Committee Martin.
Here.
School Committee Dakota.
Here.
School Committee Hoey.
Here.
6 present.
Thank you. Before I begin, maybe I should just, we'll take turns, turn this over to you, Madam Chair, and we'll go right to the school committee first. Last time we
Great.
started with the city, so we'll go that way.
So basically, our topic tonight is to review the school department. The school committee had approved our budget for 21, 22. Years are even starting to blend together now. So I know that we have materials that Ms. Turner had shared with everybody to go through the presentation for the budget.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Why don't we just, for members of the subcommittee, why don't we just proceed? Let the record also reflect, we have Councilor Drinkwater here. Superintendent of School Boyd is also here. Anybody else? The auditor is here. Chief Financial Officer is here. Anybody I miss? Nope. Okay. Ms. Turner?
So we plan on just giving a summary of what the FY20 fiscal year ended with and a beginning view of FY21. The first slide shows the strategic use of savings that we had in FY20. As you know, with COVID, we had substitute costs and transportation costs that were not incurred. So we used those savings to be strategic and help us with this current year and furthering the COVID-related needs that we had to purchase. The major purchase that we made was a $2.4 million Chromebook purchase. We replenished the circuit breaker account. We delayed charges to Grant Fringe and kept it on the local budget so that we could have access to the grant funds in this current fiscal year, knowing that it was going to be, it was very uncertain. We pre-purchased district-wide supplies and textbooks and reduced that amount for this year's budget. We pre-purchased the school-based supplies. We pre-purchased tech supplies. We reversed charges to use of facilities for the custodial staff that work during use of, when people are renting the facilities. And we also reversed Chromebook charges to grants. So that was the strategic use of our FY20 savings. That allowed us to replenish. The next slide is the revolving accounts, and this strategic use of our savings allowed us to replenish our revolving accounts. We've shown this slide for the last couple of times, and I just want to let you know that the cash balances on these accounts are still the same because we're minimizing our use of our revolving accounts so that we can use it strategically when we need it, hopefully next year. So we had expected to go up to a 2% of our overall budget. This year, that was what we had projected and hoped for. After we were a negative 0.3% in 2018, we had a negative balance. We're fortunate enough to say that we have a 4.5% balance, percentage of our overall budget now. The next slide is just section 64, showing that if we have any bills that miss out on the cutoff, if the cutoff date is at the end of July and a bill comes in after that, then we can't pay for it even if we have the funds for it. We have to have you vote. The city council has to vote to allow us to proceed. So I just put that in here to point out that the unpaid bills of previous fiscal years need 2/3 vote of the city council to appropriate the money to pay such bills. We do have the funds. The following slide is just a summary of those type of bills that came in after the cutoff. There could be a course reimbursement if someone finishing up an online course sometime in June, and if they didn't get their grades and submit this course reimbursement to us in a timely manner, then we still have to pay it, but it came in after the fact, so we have to ask for your approval to proceed. The next slide is just discussing the FY21 uncertainties, what we're facing this year. The uncertainties for FY21, with the remote instruction, substitute costs could decrease. On the other hand, remote teachers may still get sick and need substitutes, and this cost could potentially be more than usual. With remote instruction, transportation costs could decrease. On the other hand, the cost could rise due to increased need due to social distancing requirements during in-school times. With remote instruction, less PP&E may be needed. PP&E projection requires continuous analysis. With remote instruction, costs for tutors could decrease. With remote instruction, our out-of-district costs could skyrocket. With all of these uncertainties, we don't know whether we could go either way. We could end up having a lot of money left over, which we would have to strategically plan for, or we could end up having a shortage due to unknown COVID-related costs. So at this point, FY21 is just as uncertain as FY20 was, with not knowing which way to proceed as far as having a balance or not having a balance at the end of the year. That's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. Turner. I was just going to say, so as the council knows, they had received our 3 monthly budgets that we had done at the beginning of this fiscal year. The final budget was finally approved last week, so you should have received the updated, all the complete updated budget. We did land in that 182 million, I'm looking at my number now, 690,000 number, which was what had been allocated for us between both city and state funds to create our local budget. I will say in our final iteration, we did add several positions, just so the council is aware of that. We did have our suspense budget had been in place for the 3 months, but that was eliminated during the final debate, and there were 4 positions added, including an academic coach, facilities assistant director, I'm not sure the exact title, and then 2 executive assistant positions. So that was what was voted on by the committee. It did pass and was forwarded to the manager and then ultimately to the city council. I don't know if there are any other questions or if any members of the committee would like to add anything to that.
Nobody? So I do have some questions. First, on the food service revolving fund, I guess it's a good thing to see a positive balance in there, 3.6 million. What's the expectation for the end of fiscal year 20? What is the expenditure rate? We're serving less meals with less students. How is that calculated at the state level in terms, because this is a reimbursement, right? I mean, are we being reimbursed for the number of students or meals, or how is that working?
They are treating it differently during COVID. Usually it's a reimbursement per meal.
Right.
Right now, there's a new formula, and I'm not familiar with it, but they're actually working on how they're going to reimburse us this year. It's not going to be per meal, because they're actually giving 3 meals out at a time sometimes, for a student to take it for the following 2 days. So I'm not sure how they're handling that. They're promoting that. They want us to do that. They want children to have meals when they're not at school, but they haven't confirmed the formula yet for reimbursement.
Okay, that kind of is my question, and maybe the chairwoman has more. Sorry, shaking her head. So it's, I like everything else, it's unpredictable. However, how are you calculating Is it on an annual basis? Is it quarterly? How does that actually work?
It's monthly, the monthly
It's
reimbursement.
monthly?
Yes, we submit a bill to the Department of Ed monthly, and it's approximately like $90,000. If you're asking about what do we anticipate our year end, it's 3.6 currently.
Right.
But we do have to use some of those funds, so where do we plan on leaving it at? More like $3 million by the end of the year. So we've actually met the repayment schedule that we had. Remember when the food service revolving account was over?
You're hitting all my questions, so keep going.
I'm answering your questions? Okay, good. So when the revolving account was over, when too many costs were charged to the revolving account.
Right.
And it depleted the account balance to something that the Department of Ed does not feel comfortable with, we had to do a repayment plan. We asked to do it over 4 years so that we didn't have a detrimental impact to the students. If we had to pay back $2.1 million in 1 year, that would have affected the students. So we asked to do it over a 4-year plan, but we actually have already reached that point. Now we have the opposite problem. We have to make sure that we don't go over, and if we have too much money in the account, if you have more than 3 months of operating expenses, then you have too much in your account.
Okay. No, I think it's a good balance, a healthy balance. I see that you're projecting about $750,000 less, which tells me it's based upon request and reimbursement, and that's based upon meals. And just so the people at home watching know, any child that needs a meal eligible, it's 100% reimbursable from the state and federal government, and they're entitled to it, right? So even if you're not going to school, or you're fully remote now, correct? Right. So there are, if I remember correctly from the outset of this, there are still drop-off locations, certain schools. Maybe you can just elaborate for one more time.
I'd only just add into that in terms of eligibility here in the city, every student is eligible. We no longer, students no longer have to apply to become eligible for free and reduced lunch. It's across the board, any student in the Lowell Public Schools qualifies to participate in any of our food programs.
Okay, good. And the locations?
There's different school locations, I know.
Mr. Superintendent?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair. So at the STEM Academy, 11 to 1 daily, the Maury, 11-12 daily, the Robinson, 11:30 to 12:30 daily, the Butler, 12 to 1 daily, the Wang, 12 to 1. Then we have Monday, Wednesday, and Friday meal sites as well, where you can pick up for multiple days. You can pick up for multiple days. This is an added benefit, as we were hearing from families, that leaving their remote learning environment during mealtime wasn't necessarily working for families that also had to supervise meal sites, or remote learning for their child. So we have then days that you can go Monday, Wednesday, and Friday and pick up for multiple days. That includes Lowell High School, which is 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock in the morning, the Stockalosa, 3:15 to 4 p.m., the Green Elge, 2:30 to 3, the Merkland, 12:30 to 1, and the Lincoln, 1 o'clock to 1:30. I had an opportunity to support our staff handing out meals just yesterday, and families can pick up quarts of milk, multiple quarts of milk based on the amount of meals they're receiving. And yesterday it was nachos that were being received, and I had one family came up, picked up 9 meals, and did notify me she picks up for the neighborhood. The next day she was going to come in and pick up 17. We do have a neighbor helping neighbor policy, and our community is really stepping up to help one another. So that's posted to all of the websites, social media, and is available to, again, if your child is a student, Lowell Public Schools, your child's eligible to receive a meal, and there's hopefully one of these sites work. If not, give us a call, and we have added sites as we hear that there's a need.
Okay, that's good. Mr. Hoey?
Thanks, Counselor. If I remember correctly, before the superintendent got here and before Billy Joe got here into the city of Lowell, at that time, they were using that budget. I won't say names, but the past superintendent and the past CFO. And if I remember correctly, the reimbursement rate I believe, was they were being told that they were going to get 100% back, the reimbursement, and it ended up only being like in the 60s, maybe 67%. I know a lot of work has been done over that in the past couple of years here, but that reimbursement, I still have some doubts on, that's all. I'm not sure about it, to be honest with you.
Ms. Turner?
So I think the misunderstanding is that we have to verify names. We have to, the state runs our names of students through a database to see if any of them are automatically eligible due to food stamps, other programs such as that. When we ran the numbers through, this was prior to me arriving, they expected the numbers to be 100%, but when they ran the numbers, there was only a 67% match between the students and the database. That was resolved, and so it is 100% still. I mean, so that's actually matching students to the state database, not the reimbursement rate.
Thank you, Counselor, and that was just a good question. It's just, I don't want to get caught like that again, that's all. Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Agreed. Anybody else? Mr. Cotto? Oh, no.
And to that point, Ms. Turner, so we're still waiting to hear from Aramark about their reimbursement formulas that they're going to be using?
Not Aramark, the Department of Ed. They have, there's a memo stating that they're processing how they'll handle, like in the past, if there were 15,000 students, they could expect approximately 15,000 reimbursement, being that we have the community eligibility provision, which is all students get it.
Right.
But now, as we explained, like the superintendent explained, neighbors can pick up for neighbors, so it's not a one-to-one. So right now, they're determining how we're going to get reimbursed. Is it going to be full cost, or is it going to be based upon our previous year's numbers? So they haven't determined, they're determining that now and letting us know how to handle it. So it's not Aramark, it's the Department of Ed.
So we're not going to, do we have a sense of when we're going to get that information?
It should be soon, because we've already, it might already be out. I have to be honest and say I haven't checked it in a couple of days, but.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Mr. Councilor Samaras has joined us on Zoom. Counselor.
I've been here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I can clarify some of it, though. The issue on reimbursement was how much, in other words, the school department will put in for reimbursement for the food program, use of custodial staff, how much time the principal spends on it, how much time administration and other staff. And I think what was happening is that the state reimbursement varies from between 9% and 11%. I think the city was up to 16%, asking for 16%. And there was, that was problematic. The state had sent us a letter saying that the city was seeking too much money, in the reimbursement for services rendered. So that did create a problem. And I think that has been followed through. And what is the reimbursement from the state now to Billy Joe Turner? You know what I'm saying, for services? In other words,
Right.
How much can you charge off in food services? What's the percentage?
So that is something different too than what.
I know, that's
Oh,
why,
okay.
but
I think it's
that confused the
10%.
issue.
Yeah,
That
it
was
was
the
the
problem.
issue. It was the issue that caused the whole problem with the food service revolving account. And right now, we're allowed 10%, but we're not even doing that. We're not pushing the limits. We're trying to charge off far less than what we're allowed to do so that we can replenish the account. Because food service, they want us to have at least, not that they want us to, they limit us at 3 months of operating costs. So we want
Correct.
that to be built back up. So we're not even going close to what the indirect cost rate is.
Because the indirect cost rate did cause us a lot of problems. because
Exactly.
It was misstated by us. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I think my questions have been answered on the food
Chairman.
service and the, oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Noon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mary Jo, you presentation, you talk about giving the remote learning that the cost for tuition will be decreased, right? So does that mean that, how do we do with remote learning and then students that still need help even after the remote learning, after class, how do they get assistance?
Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you,
Start
Mr.
with
Counselor, through the chair. All of our students are connected with their teacher and their school staff. So all of our students are assigned to classrooms with their teacher and their school staff, so they're receiving their support as they would if they were in the classroom, but they're learning remotely. Here is a question about the out-of-district cost, which relates actually to our special education students who are eligible to be in a day school placement.
Right.
So the variable cost here is if we go remote, fully remote, so right now we're at 97% of our population remote, 3% is still learning in person. This particular population of young people is learning in person. If we were to go 100% remote, these young people would have eligibility for one of the out-of-district placements that might still be in person by IEP. And these costs can be significantly more than the cost of per student in the district. So this is a variable that right now, fortunately, we're still serving our young people in district that are eligible for out-of-district placement largely. But with the variability of COVID and the COVID spread through the community, there are some districts that have had to go 100% remote. And if that's the case, we run 3-day schools, we run significant sub-separate programs. That's where this cost can become significantly higher, where Ms. Turner said skyrocket.
I see.
We estimate that that cost could be upwards of $5 million plus in terms of variability from what we have projected right now, if for some reason we ended up in a predicament that some other districts are in.
I see. Mr. Chairman, I also recall the last joint subcommittee meeting that superintendent also indicated that there was agreement between the transportation and the bus company that even fully remote, we have to pay the bus company 44%. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So now with 3% in school, what that cost come to?
So we have two separate contracts. We have a contract for our general education transportation, which would relate to then the 44%. Our special education transportation would be here. So students who are receiving bus service, if the bus is currently operating and it's a scheduled route, if it's operating for these young people, that would be on our special education contract. We'd pay that at the normal rate. If the bus is not being utilized because of COVID, the operating cost back to the vendor to keep that available as an available service is 44. So the difference between 100% and 44% is based on whether the route is actually running. If it's a scheduled route and it's running, which is here, it's 100% of the cost. If it's a route that's scheduled but not running, that's 44%.
I see. Well, thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Martin?
If I could, to your first point, Councilor Nguyen, also, I do, as I look at these uncertainties for fiscal year '21, that is the single one that I think has to give us the most pause, the special education situation. You know, as a district, and this is, you know, gone on for many, many years, we've made a very conscious effort to bring these students in district, recognizing that we have the talent in our teaching staff to be able to provide these very highly specialized educational services that students require, instead of having to send them out of district to specific you know, specific other institutions. You know, smaller communities really never have that option, but because of the size of Lowell and because of the expertise we've had in-house, we've been able to bring these programs into the district, and it has represented a huge savings for us. It's also represented a very high quality of education for students who desperately need it. But unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess it kind of can go either way, it means that we've taken on responsibility for students who have a much higher need than our traditional students. And as we look at all of the other outplacement schools that are up and functioning right now, over 90% of them are still in person. They don't have the option of going to remote because of the specialized populations that they work with. And we need to mirror that. I mean, that's, you know, that's the challenge, because otherwise these students would qualify for out of district placement, and then your costs, you know, you talk skyrocketing. It's the difference between a $15,000 per year cost and a $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 per year cost.
Madam Chairman, I like very much what I hear from you, the effort to try to bring special ed to the district, and maybe because of the expert or the specialty that we have, is there any work done now to really work on that and maybe have all the, the special ed come to Lowell, and then maybe also reach out to those small towns that do not have that capacity to come and use our service and maybe save a lot of money? Is there any work that, any preparation being done, any discussion being worked on? Could you, Mr. Superintendent, or anybody for that matter? Thank you.
Are you all set, Madam Chair? So, Mr. Dakota and the superintendent, because I think he's eager to answer.
We've been looking at trying to acquire more space, more school buildings, and we've been looking seriously at the St. Louis campus that recently closed. That would provide us with huge amount of space. I mean, a huge, very, very, very significant. You've got an empty church that could be 2 floors of space. There's a standalone building that has, I believe, 16 classrooms. Could become our citywide pre-K offering, and the main school building at St. Louis could easily become any kind of like specialty that we need for whatever age group, whatever, middle school, elementary, or high school. So there'd be a lot of options. And of course, there's the empty convent, there's the empty rectory. So there's an awful lot there. That's approximately a 7-acre space that the city could take advantage of. I know the idea of spending money is not too attractive these days, but at the end of the day, we would be saving and making money, saving money, a considerable amount of money. $2 million is my best guess, at the very least. And then to project that out in terms of offering services to neighboring communities where we could be making money on it, it's a win-win all around. Thank you.
So let me go to superintendent, or do you want to just jump in? Because let's get a couple of answers or questions, and then we'll go to you. Mr. Hovey.
I just had a statement. What I want to say, and I'll try to say it real quick there, Counselor. Don't forget excuse me, the Student Opportunity Act was basically going to bring 12 to almost $13 million into our city. We got 2,600, 2,700 kids with a IEP of some type. We have some kids that are really severe, the CSA classes. I don't know if we should be really inviting the whole world to come to Lowell because we have a lot of money. We don't have that money right now. I think the superintendent has a good grip on special education right now, even though a lot of people on the school side don't believe he's doing a good job in that department. I think every department he's hitting a home run. So we got to watch what we do. I mean, just think of the $13 million if it was coming toward us. And I think if I was on the city council, and I know Rodney's been around a long time, that money would have been very important to us. Very important. We wouldn't be sitting here even going over things. We'd be looking to where we could spend it. So I just think it's important to bring that up. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Superintendent, why don't we go to you, and let me just give you a couple of comments so you can probably wrap all up. I think it made sense when I was a mayor a number of years ago, seeing the trend in special ed students. So if I heard correctly from Mr. Hoey, it's around 2,600 students with an IEP. Is that correct? And then there's another group of students, and I'm not familiar with it, CSA?
That's the autism.
That's the autism children. How many students do we have? Just trying to...
Approximately 17% of our student population is identified with an individualized education plan overall.
17%, so 17% of, this is for me, but it's also for people at home.
About 2,500 students you're looking at approximately overall. When we talk about 3%, now this is some rough math, I don't have the numbers in front of me. When we're talking about the 3%, we're talking about those students with the highest need that are in substantially separate programming, which is a much smaller subset of the larger. The vast majority of our special education students are students with specific learning disabilities, maybe math or reading. They're in our general education programming receiving additional support. This population of young people are young people who are in either separate classrooms in the same school or in a separate school.
Separate school.
When we talk about
Right.
the out-of-district, these are young people largely that are in our separate day schools, the 80 Day, the Laura Lee, or the LeBlanc. They're separate schools. So our students move from based on the law, of a least restrictive environment. So they'll start in the general education classroom with additional support. They'll move, if the traditional standard educational program, the general education program with additional support is not sufficient, they'll move to a separate classroom within the same school. If they can't get sufficient support there, they'll move to a separate school. If they can't get sufficient support there, they'll move to a separate private school. Here, we've worked in the city of Lowell to identify and develop a number of these separate schools so that there's less need to go to a private school or an out-of-district school placement. So it's a much smaller subset. Right now, we have less than 500 students who are currently in-person learning in Lowell. It's a much smaller subset than the overall special education population.
So if I can, we have students that have specific needs. So we have school department, school committee, have created essentially schools within schools to teach our children specialized education, rather than in the past, and I don't know the number, but it was let's say a higher percentage, let's say 100%, students used to have to go out of district. And years moving forward, we're creating schools, offering services within the district at a significantly less rate, and to me, perhaps better education. They're not going to spending a lot of time going to locations. But, so that's what we're trying to trend. So to speak to Mr. Dakota, has an assessment, is an evaluation being done to perhaps centralize and continue, and even if necessary, create more subsets within the Lowell school system so we won't have to go out of district at all? And I agree. I mean, we should take care of our students. I'm not so sure about, more students coming in, and we have to take care of our students first. My question makes sense?
It
It's
does.
a lot.
And they're very different conversations. So I would proceed cautiously with bringing in other districts' students, and then, because then we end up sending them out and the district would incur then the out-of-district placement cost. That, I believe, was an analysis prior to my tenure that the district did conduct about out-of-district students coming to us and then being sent out of district again. For us, what we do is we are working to make sure that we can support as many young people in, as we call it, as an inclusion setting, in as most inclusive environment as possible. So that means going backwards through that map or that continuum, bringing out-of-district students back to our in-district programs, supporting as many students in our in-school programs, and as many students as possible in our within-classroom programs. That's a constant analysis, a continuous analysis that's conducted by our special education department. The added caveat during this time is the one that Mr. Dakota was bringing up, space. Space, because now we also have the social distancing requirements that are in place, and many of our sub-separate day school programs are also within very small school environments, school buildings.
Okay. So this is a conversation that we can get, I'd like to continue with you and even and members of the school committee, because I think it's important. It's more than dollars and cents, but in large part, given the circumstances and perhaps a trend in the number of students that we have, it's becoming specialized, and I think we need to certainly address it. But thank you. I think we get into the weeds a lot, and that was helpful for me. I don't know about anybody else, but so any other questions on this? I think it's pretty thorough, and perhaps I'll connect with you, Mr. Superintendent, to talk about it a little bit further. Anything else? Okay, I do have
I
questions.
think Council Conway's looking at jump.
Oh, Council Conway.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I do have actually quite a few questions here. So just to make a few comments on the in-house for SPED students and to out of placement. I think over the years that the school department has done a pretty good job trying to bring and service these students that we have in in our own school system instead of sending them out, because it can get very expensive. However, we also have to have the correct personnel and equipment in order to handle these students, because some of the students can be at a level that we do not have those expertise. And as I think I mentioned before, a couple times, that we had a number of years ago, we were paying well over $300,000 for one student. This student needed 24 hours. We obviously couldn't handle something like that. The other point too, by the way, which was brought up, was the St. Louis school, and that's something I suppose we could certainly take a look at. But keeping in mind something, when it's a school by today's standards, if all of a sudden we came in as a Lowell Public Schools, we would have to update that by right up to code. And for example, I don't believe that school would have, let's say, elevators, and we would have to put elevators in and a number of other things to make sure that we were up to code. So those are things that we do have to, we have to be very cognizant of. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Co-Chairman Connie Martin, I wonder if I could just ask just a few questions. You mentioned about the substitute teachers. Is that a problem this year, getting the substitute teachers to be able to handle a different form of education?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit, but I think your question is, our substitute teaching staff, are they prepared to function in a remote environment to be able to
Not
truly
only just to
substitute?
prepare, but are you able to get substitute teachers? Because that's always been a problem in the past, and now, of course, the situation has compounded the problem. So, where is that at now, Ms. Martin?
I would defer to the superintendent. My sense is that we're in a fairly good stead, but if you could give us the specifics, Dr. Boyd. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. So we've done two things through the chair. One is typically in typical times, our process is a per diem substitute first if there's a teacher absence, and then we cover the classroom internally if we can't find the per diem substitute. And then third, you merge classrooms. That third option is not available to us during COVID times because of social distancing and the requirements of spacing. But that second of covering internally actually becomes our first option. So we have worked collaboratively with with the United Teachers of Lowell to make sure we have greater flexibility for our paraprofessionals, for instance. Our paraprofessionals have played a more flexible role during these times in covering when a teacher is unable to be there in person for their classrooms. When we were there in person is a critical role that our paras have played. So that becomes our first instead of our second option. For our per diems, though, we still use them. We did survey our substitutes from past years, identified those who felt and were ready and available for remote classroom settings, as well as in-person settings. So we have a separate list of substitutes now available to us. We haven't yet seen the absences from a remote setting, but that you might typically see in an in-person setting, which might be an assumption we could all make, that you might not see that. That's what we didn't see that last spring. But what Ms. Turner brings up that is still a variable that could come to play here is this is a live pandemic. And as such, as people experience symptoms, we are saying to them, don't come to work. They can teach remotely if they're asymptomatic. However, if they become symptomatic, they're not going to be able to teach. So this is a variable cost that right now we have forecasted using our past data. Last year, that forecast showed that it was an overestimate. But here, what we're making sure is that we continue to monitor it. We have substitutes available as in addition, we have greater flexibility with our internal staff, and right now, with us being 97% remote, we're not seeing as many, but we are cognizant of it, and we'll continue to monitor it going forward. So thank you, Counselor.
Yeah, now, Mr. Superintendent, also, which was mentioned by Co-Chair Connie Martin, that there were a number of several jobs that were added, positions that were added. Were those added, or were they, are they new jobs, or were they just jobs that were covered by already existing jobs.
Thank you. Through the chair, those were restored positions. So if you recall, this was covered within our last discussion, the last time we were in chambers for our joint meeting. We had approximately $1 million of reductions to central positions. These were positions within. In 2 cases, they were retirees that we froze and had recommended initially to reduce, that we did restore to the budget. Those are the 2 clerks. One is a grant-funded academic coach that was actually reduced outright. The individual was moved to another position in the district. That one would be restored. And then the other was a facilities area manager that was a position that was vacated last year. We reduced it upon vacancy, and then with the needs in terms of facilities, we recommended to restore it. So all 4 of those positions were restored positions that were previously on the slate as part of our $1 million reduction to central office positions. So not new, restored positions.
I say.
But if I could, Dave, I'm sorry, just to wrap that up, because, and we were able to do that without impacting our bottom line, because monies that had been put in suspense were then used to bring those positions back. So the bottom line
Okay.
didn't change.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, obviously we have to be, we're careful in the school department, the city side and so forth, because of the tight financial budgets here. I was wondering, the last time we talked, we did mention so that we understand what the left hand and the right hand is doing, because I think I've always advocated it shouldn't be the school department versus the city. It should be one team, obviously. So having said that, we are meeting, is that correct? And how often are we meeting with the school and the city finance departments? On what, how often do they meet, and to give updates on what has actually happened in the finance part?
Sure. So, I guess as a collective group, we had suggested team meetings almost about a year ago, as I recollect. And Ms. Turner, Mr. Baldwin, meetings, do we still meet? My understanding, it was a collective meeting between school finance team and the city finance team.
That's correct. I brought that up
Ms. Turner?
a while ago.
It's true that Connor Baldwin does hold a monthly meeting, and it includes all the various departments. There are many times where there's a conflict with the city, but now there's a deputy CFO, and she was able to attend this month. But it is a priority of ours, and he does hold them, consistently, so they are monthly. But we're not always able to get to them. It's not a one-on-one meeting, but what we did say is that we're going to start meeting more directly with each other, not necessarily as a...
So we can't, so the school department participate in these meetings?
The school department will participate in these meetings and have, but not, like I said, there's many times, like it could be a school committee night where there was a subcommittee or, and we're in the middle of getting ready for that. So there have been times where we haven't been able to, but now that there's a deputy CFO, there's one or the other that can go. If I can't make it, Ms. Kearns could go.
So you have a deputy CFO?
Well,
Okay, look, Mr. Conway, we only got about 10 minutes left, and I got about 7 questions, so go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
Right. That's why that was brought up a number of months ago, because we did have we had some problems with the finances on the school side, so we wanted to make sure that didn't come up, and that we knew what both sides were actually doing as far as the finance, so that we wouldn't run into these problems. And then the only way you can do that is you have to meet on a regular basis. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it, and I appreciate this meeting, because I think we need to continue to have these meetings too. Thank you.
Yep, I agree. Okay, so, Billy, let's wrap this up, because, I want to get to some other issues. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the good news is that Mr. Baldwin is very accessible to me, so anytime I'm uncertain, I don't just proceed without calling him or emailing him.
Sure.
So even when we're not meeting, we're definitely in contact where we're knowing what each other's doing.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's important, because it's going to segue into, and I have to say, my next comments, I'm disappointed to see these bad bills, because it was just about a year where we had significant bad bills, And here we are, there's close to $37,000 of bad bills. And, you know, I looked at some of the explanations included in your presentation. I appreciate you bringing them, you know, well, you have to bring them forward because they require city council approval, but, you know, we're in October. Fiscal year closed in June, and I look at some of these things, and I don't understand how this can continue. Shipping and handling, Oriental trading. Maybe you can explain a little bit more, and but to me, it's not acceptable. This is kind of routine procedures that we had been given commitment that they were going to be in place. And, you know, I understand circumstances happen, but there's quite a list here, in my opinion. So if you, I know you spoke to them a little bit, we can't continue to have these bad bills. I mean, explain how is this happening again? POs closed. People know they got to get their bills in. This is not, this has been going on long before you and I and everyone else in this building was here. Fiscal year ends, you don't spend without a PO, without permission. You got to get the invoices in. So help me here, please.
So I agree 100%, and it's a frustration that I face too. We implemented, last year when I saw that we had bad bills, I thought, oh, I could solve this problem and it won't happen under my watch. And I thought that I was going to be the hero that could save the day. But unfortunately, even when I implemented, instead of waiting until year end to review the open purchase order list, we started to do it quarterly. And we would get in touch with the 28 school clerks. They're not all accountants, and they don't all have the same organizational abilities. So unfortunately, if we review their open purchase order report, we could ask them and say, did you receive everything? Are you still waiting for anything? And if they say no, then the purchase order would be canceled, thinking, and then if all of a sudden an order came in that they didn't remember, we're responsible for that still. Course reimbursements, the course reimbursements, they could have ended in June, and if the person didn't submit their reimbursement form, which in the past they didn't have to, but we're trying to, between the auditing department and the school department, we're trying to have stricter rules. So whereas in the past it might have been the same thing, but you wouldn't have noticed it because it wasn't considered a bad bill. The course reimbursement now, if it was from last year and it's just now being submitted, we're considering that a bad bill and bringing it to your attention. So it's more that we have stricter rules, and the cutoff, once the cutoff is done, they're not allowing us to pass things through anymore. We're actually stopped. So it's...
Well, I mean, I'm going to give the credit to the auditor, because that's her job.
Exactly.
And if she didn't, then she wouldn't be performing a job. So I appreciate it. But can you tell me the $11,000 for course reimbursements? What is that all about?
The 11th, they're
Tuition,
allowed,
excuse me, yeah.
for the course reimbursements, those are 2 classes that were taken by people, not 2 classes, but 2 people who had course reimbursements that submitted it after the fact, but they were denied because of the fact that it was after July 20th. And again, we're responsible for it because the contract language doesn't say that they have to submit it within 20 days after the course ends. It doesn't say anything like that. But because we are following the rules with fiscal years, it's coming up on a list now. But just to emphasize that we have tried to implement the open purchase order review quarterly. We tried to do a year-end review of the bad bills and actually actively call. We had each of the clerks call all of their vendors to make sure that all invoices were in. Some of them are due to the pandemic, and that we could, if they sent a bill to the school and it sat on an empty school's desk somewhere, in a clerk's office, and there was no one in the building. So there are many little things like that could happen, but we are actively trying to stop it.
Members of the subcommittee, any other questions, issues? Oh, I'm sorry.
Could you compare this to last year's total?
Last year, it was approximately 85,000, about 85,000. And we have the funds. It's not a matter of us coming and asking for.
I understand that, yeah. I would just say, that shows improvement, so that is at least encouraging. To the Councilor Elliott's point, I absolutely agree. I mean, this is definitely something that we need to continue to nail down. You know, every government, every agency, if something comes in after June 30th, you know, you're done. I mean, I've been refused travel reimbursements because I didn't get my paperwork in on time. That's just the way you kind of need to make these things work. So I understand there are some intense, you know, when you're talking about a course reimbursement or things like that. So I appreciate the improvement in the year, but I agree with you that as we go through this year, we're going to need to become more and more strident on ensuring that things wrap on the June 30th deadline. Because it's not like we don't see it coming. I mean, same time every year.
One suggestion I have is that I wanted to ask the schools if they have a bad bill for now and let them come before city council and explain why they didn't give it, and perhaps that would be a good deterrent or like a nice motivator.
She might be, but you know what? I think that's a good suggestion, because I want to know, before I vote to support these, and I have to tell you, I'm not inclined to support these, not because you didn't do your due diligence, because people need to know. They want to get reimbursed. You know what? We have a lot of challenges, and one of them is finances. So, Mr. Hoey?
Thank you very much, Counselor. I have to say a few things after listening to Mr. Conway. He did work in our school system for quite a few years, and I thought he might be a little bit more open to how inclusive we are. Under this new superintendent, okay, we had a state senate say, we're going to give you $13 million. That doesn't happen. Then this young man gets hit with, we're going to take $600,000 of free cash away from you. This school committee, to me, has never worked closer with the city than we have this year to try to get the buildings ready. I think both sides have done a marvelous job, both sides. Under this superintendent, 155 Merrimack Street, the rent's a lot lower. I don't have the figures in front of me. I just want to respond to a few more things and I'll be done. We pay for the tab for the adult education, which is one of the best probably in the country. We also just moved the freshman academy so you can have daycare. This school department has done more to work with the city than I've ever seen. We even bought a big F-350 truck to help you plow around our schools. So I think we're all hurting for money. You know, I know the city's got finance problems, so don't the school. And that's all I have to say, but it was a great meeting, and the bill should be paid. Nice job, Counselor.
No, you know, Mr. Hoey, I agree. I mean, I looked at the budget, and I did see, you know, big ticket items like the lease. I mean, if I remember correctly, it was well over 100,000. Is that correct? Yeah. So I agree. It's just it's disconcerting that, to me, it's a few. It's just a few in the system that were negligent, quite frankly. You can't tell me that you're going to you get a $5,000 bill for tuition and you're not going to submit it. I know that I'm going to submit it immediately. And I agree with you, whether it's travel or not, there's a deadline. So, and I get mistakes happen, but there are quite a few here. But we are all rowing in the right direction. I don't disagree. Because like you all, next year, and I'll say it, I think next year is going to be a nightmare. I think given some of the funding levels, luckily the school department received, we were able to balance this budget. I don't have my crystal ball isn't better than anyone else, but I'm not guessing that COVID money is going to be coming in such significant dollars. So there's some big gaps in the state level, and on the state level, not only are we down to 13 million, but we're going backwards, or at least we're not going forwards, and we need that money. So, any other questions on the bad bills here? No. Ms. Auditor, Madam Auditor.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that some of these could have been taken care of through the purchase order process. So if you have a purchase order in place and the funds are encumbered before June 30th, that will be ensured that they're paid with fiscal year 20 funds. So if you had the purchase order in, it would have taken care of probably the majority of these, I would assume, besides the employee reimbursements, because those don't go through the PO process. So your bad bills sorry, would have been down to almost none this year, which would have been great.
Hold on, Madam Auditor. Folks in the LTC room, we're getting a lot of feedback out here, so we can't hear the speaker. Go ahead. Everybody on Zoom, could you mute your mic because we're getting feedback here, please? Okay, Madam Auditor, can you continue, please? Can you just continue from the PO process, because I couldn't hear you.
Sure. So if the funds are encumbered by the fiscal year end, that will ensure that there's money available to pay these bills if they come after year end. So that would have taken care of, I would say, the majority of the bills on this list, with exception to the employee reimbursement, because those don't go through the PO process. But that's something we can address later on. So I just wanted to make that clear, that if we get the PO in, we can ensure that they're paid within the right period.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. We get 2 minutes. Let the record note that Council Mercy has also joined us quite some time ago. Council Mercy, do you have anything? I'm sure Mr. Hoey would give you a mic. Oh, no, you get a mic. And then I'll go back to you, Ms. Turner, okay? Okay. Ms. Turner, and then anything else, Mr. Superintendent? You want to close out? Council Drinkwater, did you have anything?
Oh,
Sorry. Yeah.
can I?
Go ahead, yeah.
I just wanted to say I absolutely agree, and that's why, if you notice that some of them, the accounts payable person that paid these is the one that made up the comments on the side, and as you can see, that there were POs in many of them, but it says PO was closed by the city. So it's not as though they didn't go through some of them, because I have had people make an order without a purchase order, and of course, we're outraged and we try to reprimand them. But there were many of them that had purchase orders, but when you close them at the end, because the invoices weren't in, now there's not a purchase order to charge it against, but they did start with the purchase order. So if you notice, like, we could look up the purchase order numbers and share those with you, because it says right here, purchase order closed by city.
Right, they got to get their bills in. They know they obligated the money. They know a bill is coming, right? They know an invoice is coming, and they know what the deadline is.
So can we
Okay.
do what we said and have them come to you? We'll make a new motion, like, that they have to bring them to you themselves?
Nothing's before the council tonight, so. Okay, thank you. I agree. I think this was productive. I think it's good to have these regular meetings. I know it's a struggle for all our schedules, but no objection from the chair of the finance. We'll continue to, if you want to meet, and, we're happy to come on a night that you have. So it's not just Tuesday nights. If you want to come on Wednesday night, I'll make myself available. I'm sure the subcommittee will. So thank you for making time, because we just kind of send a date over to Minerva, and then she circulates it, and let's just keep working together, because I think it will be productive. So anything further? I think we should explore that SPED idea, and if we need additional space with this COVID, it's not going away soon. Based on capacity issues, we should do that. Maybe we should talk about it. So if there's nothing further, I'll entertain a motion by Ms. Martin, seconded by Councilor Noon. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and those opposed, that motion carries. This meeting stands adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone. Sorry, Mr. Superintendent, we didn't get you that last time.